So we're on the book of Samuel. It's very long, but who's Samuel? Samuel was a judge and he was a seer. He was a prophet of God, okay? So in the beginning of the story, we have Samuel's parents, Elkanah and his two wives. One was Hannah, one was Peninnah. Peninnah had lots of children, but Hannah couldn't have children. And she kind of flaunted that to Hannah, right? It said that she provoked her with all her kids and made her feel bad, okay? And Hannah prayed to God for a child, and God gave her Samuel. Okay, Samuel, and so Hannah had Samuel be trained to be a priest since he was very young. As soon as he was weaned, Hannah gave Samuel to these priests to train him to be a priest, to be a Levite, right? And there's meaning in that. God gave Hannah a son, okay, and she in return gave him back to God, kind of. There's meaning in that, right? She wanted Samuel to be to work for the Lord, to know the Lord. And the word Samuel means God hears. Like, she prayed for her son and God heard her, and so she named her son Samuel, which means God hears in Hebrew. And Eli, the head priest at that time, had two sons, but they had a couple, 3 sons, but they were evil. They were supposed to be, they were priests too, supposedly they were priests too, but they were evil. They were not making the sacrifices right. They were saving all the sacrifices for themselves, and they're even eating raw meat with a 3-pronged fork. That should be a hint. It gives you hints, okay? 3-pronged fork. Who uses a 3-pronged fork, guys? Satan, right? Anyway, that's a hint. And they were sleeping with women, a bunch of women, in the tabernacle, which is really evil. So God obviously didn't want these guys to be priests, so God chose Samuel. Okay? First of all, he was a miracle birth, right? That should be a hint right there. He was a miracle birth. Hannah prayed to God. She couldn't have kids, and Samuel was a miracle birth. Another miracle birth. Remember the miracle births? Again, the main miracle birth is Jesus, but there's ones leading up to that. So Samuel is living with Eli, okay? And God starts talking to Samuel in the middle of the night. He calls him 3 times. He's like, Samuel. And at first Samuel thinks that it's Eli. He's like, what do you want? He's like, I didn't call you. And then he went back to bed. And then God called him again. He said, Samuel. And he thought it was Eli again. And Eli was like, no, I think it's God. Like, answer him. And there's meaning in that, right? Sometimes God calls you. You don't always hear him right away. Okay? It takes some time sometimes for you to actually listen and know it's him. But he does talk to you guys, all right? If you really want to know him, he'll talk to you. You just have to be ready to listen. Okay? All right. All right. So so the Philistines were in a battle with the Israelites, okay? And so the Israelites decided to Samuel's still there. He's a prophet. He becomes very popular amongst the people as a prophet of God, but they go into battle, okay, with the Philistines. And the Israelites still have the Ark of the Covenant, guys. They still have it. But so they were like, I know, let's just take the ark out, and we'll I think it was the book of Judah, the book of they took it out in a war and they just won the war, right? So no, so they take this ark out, and they think just to kind of just like a magic thing they were trying to do to win the war instead of like really doing anything. Okay, and of course they lost. There's meaning in that. Okay, so you guys, you can't just use God as like some sort of like lucky charm or something, okay? they were kind of just being arrogant about it. They just wanted to take it out and have the war won and just like not work. Like, you know what I mean? They didn't want to do any work themselves. They're being arrogant. Like, we're just going to win the whole war. We're just going to take the ark out. And God didn't like that. He didn't like how he was messing with him. He was testing him. Okay. So they lose the war, that fight, and then sorry, so this is in the book of Joshua, when they win that war. Anyway, so they tried to do it again, but they were being arrogant about it this time. Okay. And so they lost the war, and then not only did they lose the war, the Philistines stole the ark. The Philistines stole the ark, and they took it into their cities, okay? And so, first, I mentioned Dagon. I'll put the link below. Dagon was a demonic entity. It was one of their gods, okay? But I have a whole video on Dagon. I'll put it in the link below. But they took the ark to where they kept this Dagon statue in their temple, okay? And the statue kept falling and breaking, okay? Because God didn't want to be in the, you know what I mean? God is like, I don't want to be in a room with your demon gods, right? So anyway, and then like they kept moving the ark, and like wherever the city they would go to, they'd have that God cursed them. Like they whenever they moved the ark to a different city, because they kept trying to move it. They wanted to keep it, but they didn't know what was going on. So they, so wherever city they went to, they were plagued with rats. Okay, all these rats would start coming, and then and then God cursed them with hemorrhoids. Okay, this is kind of funny. And this is what the Bible says, you guys. I don't know. So God cursed them with hemorrhoids and rats. Whatever town they went to, they cursed the people and they killed everybody. He killed everybody, like you know what I mean? Because they had no business having the ark. So the Philistines, they wanted to give the ark back. Okay, they were like, they didn't want it anymore because this thing was just cursing them, right? So the Philistines priests, which were like witches, I guess, I don't know, like, because they're all about engraving images and stuff, and so they're like, well, give the ark back, but not only give it back, but give it presents. You know what I mean? Give it presents so their God can forgive us or something. So they said that. So they put to as kind of like an I'm sorry forgiveness token, they made 5 golden images of rats and then 5 golden images of hemorrhoids. Okay, that's what it says in the Bible. And they put it with the ark, and they sent the ark off with some ox, hoping the ox would just like take them to the people. Okay, to the Israelites. So yeah, God's probably like, no thanks. I don't know, but yeah, they made golden images of the rats and the hemorrhoids, and they put it inside the ark as like a token of I'm sorry. And God was just like, no, probably like, no thanks. But anyway, he doesn't like engraving images. He probably definitely doesn't want engraving images of rats and hemorrhoids. Anyway, so that's what's happening right now. All right. So the people asked Samuel for a king, okay? They wanted a king like everyone else. There's a meaning in that. They wanted to be like everyone else. So they asked Saul for a king, to talk to God about giving us a king. We want a king. And Saul got mad, and so did God, kind of. God got mad too, okay? Because first of all, God always says you need to be different from everybody else. He doesn't want you doing what everyone else is doing. And he warns them. He warns them what a king, a human king will be like. Okay? Like, you're going to have to sacrifice your kids to this guy, your food, like everything. It's not going to be what you think. And plus, God is your king. Okay? And also, the real king hasn't came yet. The real king is Jesus. It was David, but then it was Jesus. Like, if you, Moses, in the time of Moses, they said a scepter will come out of Judah. A scepter means king. Okay? It was a prophecy. The scepter will come out of Judah. But Saul came out of the Benjamites. So definitely wasn't him, right? But the people wanted a king now. They didn't want to wait. So God warned them. Saul warned them. Saul got mad at them. But God gave him a king. He said, all right, go ahead. Go get your king. It'll be Saul. So Saul was the very first king of the Israelites. Okay. Saul anointed him with the horn of oil. Saul was not a good king, you guys. God warned him. He warned him. They didn't want to wait. They wanted to be like everyone else. And Saul was not a good king. He was not the chosen king. The real king is Jesus, right? But God wanted David to be king. But anyway, David wasn't born yet. Okay, so Saul was chosen to be king, and he was a bad king. Okay, he was very arrogant. I'll get into that in a minute. So one of the things, like, he'd go into battles, and he had a son, Jonathan. His son's name was Jonathan, and like he would go into battles, and this is where they get that term "toot your own horn," right? So he would make his son would lead a battle, and he would blow the horn like he did it. You know, this is where they get that term "toot your own horn," right? So he would just watch people fight and take all the glory for himself, and he was very arrogant. And God told him to wait to do the sacrifices before a battle, but Saul would just do it himself. Saul would just do it himself. And Samuel's like, "What are you doing? You're not a Levite. You're not a priest. You're not trained to do this. You can't just slap on something on an altar and be like, oh, it's good now." No, like Saul was always yelling at him, like, you are not doing good. One of the worst. Yeah, I'm gonna get all into the Amalekites. So, God, when you read it, it even sounds strict. You're like, wow, God, really? But God told Saul to kill all the Amalekites, their cows, their kids, everything. He said to get rid of no trace of them at all, which sounds really, really strict, right? I'm going to get into that in a minute. But Saul, remember this, Saul didn't do it, okay? He let some of them go, and he didn't kill the king of Agag yet. He kept the king of Agag. And God said to kill their cattle, but instead Saul used their cattle as sacrifices. Oof. You guys don't understand how bad that is. Okay. When you don't do it exactly what God says, and you do it as sacrifice, it goes into the demonic realm. But you'll see this in a minute. I'll explain this to you in a second. But so Saul and God got mad about this one. They are mad at him for not killing all the Amalekites. Okay. I'm going to talk about the Amalekites in this next slide. If you watch the Amalekites, so Saul, like, when he didn't kill all the Amalekites, he let some of them go. He killed most of them, but he didn't kill the king. But Saul told him, he yelled at him, and he said, "You're no longer going to be the king. Like, God is taking his blessing away from you. You did not listen to him when he told you to kill all the Amalekites." And Saul was just like, they are perfectly good cows. Why did I want to kill them? To us, that makes sense. I know. Why would I kill every single person? Why do I have to kill every single person? That didn't make sense to me, so I didn't do it. Okay, I'm going to get into that in a second. So the next slide is about the Amalekites, and this stuff is crazy. So, I've decided to do a whole nother video on the Amalekites because it's too much. This video is going to be too long as it is. The Amalekites are very evil. That's why God said to kill them all. The Amalekites are still here today. I'm going to get into that in my next video about them. The Amalekites ended up being like Nazis and stuff, guys. Like, no joke. Just in the Bible, though. If you were just talking about that Bible, the Amalekites started from Esau, okay? And then, and then they are attacking people in Deuteronomy. They're attacking people, the Amalekites. Amalekites. These guys are always been evil, and God's like, kill them. You have to kill all of them, the cattle and everything. This is serious. You have to, and I know to us that sounds brutal, but you don't understand. Just in the next chapter, just in the same book, the Amalekites end up killing David's whole city. And then in Asher, the book of Asher, Agag, the king of the Amalekites at the time, his descendants ended up killing almost all of the Israelites. And it just keeps happening in history, even outside of that time. The Amalekites end up being like Nazis, you guys. Like, I'm not kidding. You think God didn't know that? I'm gonna make a whole other video about that. The Amalekites ended up being like Nazis, you guys. That's why God said to kill them all, but Saul didn't. He let some of them go, just a couple of them, and look what happened. This is why it's important when you read the Bible. It talks about all these genealogies and stuff. Okay. It's very strongly believed that these Amalekites ended up being like descendants, the godfathers of like the Nazis, okay? Not Hitler per se, but like just like that. Anyway, I'll get into that in another video. That's why God said to kill them all. Thank you, Saul, for Nazis and all these other wars that happened because you let just a few of them go and you didn't kill them all and the cattle. Anyway, so Saul didn't kill them all. And now there's a bunch of wars with these Amalekites even today, okay? Like, that's why God said to kill them. And this is what happens when you don't listen to him. And then you turn around and get mad at him, right? Why, if there was a God, why was there a Holocaust? Like, all this stuff. Like, well, if you would have just listened to him in the first place, it probably none of that stuff would have happened. But we keep just ignoring him, right? Anyway, so I'm making another video about the Amalekites another time, but that's what's happened. That's why God was so strict about these Amalekites. They ended up being a very evil generation. All right, that's why Genesis. I talk about that. I'm gonna go into a little bit about that. That is how it talks about how it's in your genes, right? The demonic DNA is in your genes. That evil, it stays in your familiar spirits. It stays in the bloodlines. Anyway, but the Amalekites ended up being bad even in the Bible, and they came from Esau, grandsons of Esau, okay? So I'm going to go to the next slide. I'll get into the Amalekites in another video. So, Saul is evil, okay? Saul's evil. He just started Nazis, of course. So, and again, I'll bring that up in another video. Saul isn't listening to God. Samuel basically tells him, God doesn't want you to be king anymore. You messed up, son. Anyway, so Saul secretly goes and looks for another king, and that's King David. King David, David at this time is probably like 14, okay? He's pretty young. Anyway, so Saul knows that he's going to be a future king, and he brings him back to the palace. He hires him to work for them, okay? Under King Saul for right now. And Saul, of course, immediately after not killing the Amalekites, I wonder why, but he has an evil spirit, okay? He is tormented by demons, literally. No joke, bro, he's probably Hitler. I don't know. But, anyway, he starts being plagued by demons. And so David's hired to play. David's a musician. David wrote, like, psalms and stuff like that in the Bible, okay? He's a big player in the Bible, like, huge player in the Bible. King David was like brought everyone back together again because this is the type of judges still. Anyway, he wrote all these psalms and stuff. Anyway, so so he's hired to play these instruments for Saul to keep these evil spirits away, and it works. Okay, somewhat. Saul still has them, but most of the time they go away as long as David keeps playing his instruments for him. I think that's pretty poetic. And then the main story is David and Goliath. You have to remember that David's still pretty young. He's like probably like 14 or 15. It makes it sound like he's pretty young. Okay. David isn't in the battle. Like the Goliath was a Philistine, right? And David wasn't in the battle. He was there just to deliver food to his brothers, okay? Because his brothers were in the war. And he said, and King Saul says, whoever can kill this guy, like, I'll give, like, you a bunch of money and you'll be like anointed by God, and like promise him all this stuff. And so David's like, I'll do it. I want to do it for my God. I want to do it for God. I think I can kill him. He said that God gave him strength once to kill a lion and a bear, so I think I can kill him. And Saul even tried to give him some like armor, and he said, no, I don't want the armor. I'm just good with these rocks. So he kills Goliath. Okay, and there's meaning in that, right? There's a big theme here. I'll get to the end of it. There's a big theme here. So David kills Goliath and cuts off his head, and they actually take some of his armor and stuff to sell later in the story. Anyway, of course, Saul starts becoming jealous of David. Okay, he starts becoming jealous of David, and throughout First Samuel, he's just constantly trying to kill him. He's running after him, trying to kill him. Saul's evil. There's another side story of where Saul like told his whole army not to eat. Saul has a son named Jonathan, and Jonathan and David were really best friends. Okay, and Jonathan's warning David to like stay away. You have to run away. He's trying to kill you. He keeps trying to kill you, and even at one point, because King David's very humble and Saul's very proud, right? David has twice, I think. David has opportunity to kill Saul. He has opportunity to kill him, okay? David's hiding in caves and stuff like this. He's hiding in caves. He's trying to run away from him. But he sees Saul once, and Saul doesn't notice him. He has the opportunity to kill him, and he doesn't. Okay? Because he doesn't want to kill him. He still loves him. He still, he loves, and, even Jonathan, this picture right here is actually Saul trying to kill Jonathan, his own son. His son loved his dad, but Saul was just obviously being plagued by demons, so there's a hint right there. But he tried to kill his son just because he was trying to stick up for David. He didn't care. Anyway, so like even at one point, so he tells the army not to eat during for battle, which is stupid because then they all get weak and they can't fight. And he says, if you eat, I'm going to kill you. And Jonathan didn't even hear that part, but he ate some honey. And he tries to kill Jonathan just because he ate some honey. You know what I mean? He's like, sorry, I made up the rules. I got to kill you. But he ends up not doing it because the people start getting mad at Samuel. And they save Jonathan. And so Saul, he's just getting mad. And Samuel basically says, I don't want to talk to you. Samuel, disowned him. He's like, talk to the hand, bro. Samuel disowns Saul, says, you know that you're not with God anymore, and you just keep trying to kill David, and then Samuel dies, okay? Samuel dies, and everyone's very sad, and, so David keeps running into these caves. I keep bringing up the caves as a connection for later, okay? Because later, David hides in caves for a different reason. But he's very innocent right now. David, he's very innocent. He's hiding in caves. He's very humble. And he believes in God, right? Okay, next slide. So, Saul's chasing after David almost through this whole book. And David has plenty of times to kill him, but David doesn't kill him. And Saul even, if you read it, Saul even apologizes a couple times. He's like, I'm so sorry, I won't do it again. There's meaning in that, right? You can't just say you're sorry and do whatever you want the next time. So Saul, he's constantly being troubled with his evil spirit now that David can't play the music for him anymore to get rid of it, right? So the evil spirits are really on him, and he's having a bad time, and he's evil, okay? And God's not talking to him. Samuel's not talking to him. And so he does the worst thing he could possibly do. He goes to a witch, okay? He goes to a witch. This is going to end well. So, the witch then tells him, well, I'm going to bring up a familiar spirit named Samuel for you. Because remember, Samuel died. And it was a ghost of Samuel. Whoa! And this quote unquote ghost of Samuel told him that basically God hates him and that he's just gonna die anyway in the war. And so what does Saul do? He kills himself. All right, Saul and his brother and his armor bearer kill himself, and the rest of his family does die in the war. But Saul listens to this evil spirit and kills himself. Okay, because guess what? That's not Samuel. It's a demon. Okay, do not consult witches for your problems. They're just gonna give you more problems. Okay, so this evil spirit convinced him to kill himself, basically, and So the Philistines won. They took their bodies, Saul's body and poor Jonathan's body. Jonathan loved his dad, and his dad was just a jerk, right? And they cut off their heads, they hung up their bodies on this wall. Okay. I wanted to bring up the wall, and later the Israelites came and took them down and buried them. But I wanted to bring up the wall because this wall is this wall's real. Okay. Here's the wall. It's still there. I try to, as much as I can remember to. I try to bring up the archaeology of this being real. Okay, guys, because I want you guys to know the Bible's real. This is a little picture. Anyway, this is the wall. This is the wall. It's in Bethshem. Okay, and so near Israel, Jerusalem. Okay. This is the wall they hung their bodies on. It's still there. You can still visit it. Because the Bible, I'm going to say the Bible's not a myth. This is the book of real stories, okay? So what was the point of Samuel? Okay, first off, I also wanted to bring up the fact that David, this is some foreshadowing, okay? So David's a really good guy. He doesn't kill Saul, even though Saul's trying to kill him. He's very humble. He slays Goliath. He basically wins. He is winning over Saul, right? He's casting out demons. He's all kinds of good stuff right now. But I wanted to bring up right now, David has 3 wives, okay? That's a hint. That's a hint of what's going to happen in the future, right? David has 3 wives right now. And that's a hint to what his problem is going to be later in the next book. Okay? But I wanted to bring that up. But I wanted to bring up so what's the point of this book so far, okay? I'm obviously not the best editor, guys. I'm just trying to get this information to people. I'm trying to get people to read the Bible because God wants you to know this stuff, and I'm trying to help people understand it a little bit. Even though I'm not an expert, I understand it somewhat. So what's the point? There's a constant, do you see the constant struggle between the proud and the humble? First, it was with Peninnah, and Hannah, Samuel's mom and his, the other wife of her husband. Peninnah was very humble, and Peninnah was she was very mean and flaunting all her kids. And Hannah was very humble, and God blessed her, right? And Eli's sons and Samuel's sons, right? Eli's sons were evil, right? But God chose Samuel and David, right? God really chose like a 10-year-old over Eli's sons to be a priest, because that's how God works, okay? And then there's Saul and David, obviously. That's the struggle, the humble and the good, right? Saul was very humble and proud. If you read it, it even talks about how, I forgot to mention one of the main points. When Saul was going to be anointed king, they liked how he looked. He was very tall and handsome. Saul was a very big, tall guy, and he was obviously looked like a king. That's probably why they liked him at first, right? David was like a little kid, right? And he looked very meek and like, in our eyes, we pick Saul, okay? And it even says in here, God sees your soul, not what you see. He doesn't have our same eyes as we do, okay? He sees better. Okay, he sees people into their hearts, not what they look like on the outside. And obviously his choices are better. Even though they don't make sense to us, even though to us that it looks like it's not a good idea for David to be king and not Saul, it's the right choice, okay? Samuel was the right choice. Hannah was the right choice. David was the right choice, okay? David's heart is the focal point of the book, and Jesus is the perfect David. Yes, I always try to bring it back to Jesus. But you're going to see later how even David wasn't perfect. And we needed a king that was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Because those little imperfections can lead us downward the wrong path just so easily. And that's why God sent Jesus, because he was perfect. He didn't do anything wrong. He was innocent. Right? So that's the main point of this so far. God, you guys, I'm going to bring back... God has a plan, you guys. Like, he has a... It's not how we think. He thinks better. That's why he says, don't trust not on your own understanding, because we think very linearly and in the moment. God has a long game, okay? God and Satan, they both play the long game. God's thinking about 200 years from now, okay? He sees 200 years from now, and so does Satan, and that's how they plan things. We see only our lives right now, okay? So we don't understand when he tells us to do stuff and look this way and do this. We don't like to listen to him because in the moment that doesn't sound like a good idea. Okay? God's timing is perfect. Okay? His timing is perfect. Our timing is very selfish and just very narrow-minded. His timing, he's trying to save everybody. He's looking for the good of everyone. But like the Amalekites, okay? I might make a different video about that later. Look what happened. Saul didn't want to kill the Amalekites, and they ended up, in the whole Bible, they ended up killing the Israelites over and over again. And they ended up being evil later. Okay? Again, I'm bringing back the Amalekites ended up being like part of, like, what they think that's part of where this Nazi propaganda, this Nazi thinking came from, okay? It came from this bloodline. It came from Esau's bloodline. Anyway, and I'll get into that in a different video, but the point is, you need to listen to God even though we don't understand at the time, okay? Because he's doing the domino effect, okay? He's playing the long game, and so is Satan, okay? We never see what Satan's doing long game is because at the time it seems like a good idea, right? It's the opposite. Satan's plans look good to us at the time because we like the way he thinks. He doesn't think he's trying to, yeah, That's why we always choose Satan. We always think like him. He's in us. All right, and it's so hard to think how God thinks because we're just so selfish. Anyway, so that's the point of all these this humble versus these proud people and who ended up being on top. Okay. All right.